It's Brian Preston, the money guy.
Yep. So Brian, we've talked a little bit about houses, which are like these big assets. We've talked a little bit about cars, which are these other big assets. Those are maybe two of the most expensive things that we'll spend money on in our lifetimes. However, when you're talking about things that you use a lot, and when we survey the folks who we interact with that have done well and had some success, it's interesting when you think about things that you use a lot. I would also think about things that you are on a lot. And it was kind of pithy. The content team came up with this. They thought about shoes and mattresses because there's this idea, if you're not on one, you're probably on the other. So you may want to make sure you're putting money into those for your long-term well-being.
So, and by the way, on the shoes, this also is influenced by Stop Acting Rich. You know, Dr. Stanley had the book, after he did Millionaire Next Door, he also had this book that was like, Stop Acting Rich, actually live like true millionaires do. And one of the things I thought was kind of interesting, because there were a few contrarian points, is that wealthy people do spend a good... They don't buy the cheapest shoes. It's not like they're going out there and buying the cheapest shoes they can put on their feet. They recognize, hey, if you're putting a lot of mileage on your feet, if you're actually getting a lot of wear and tear, comfort is important to the happiness and fulfillment of using this money well. So that's why, Cole Haan and some other things showed up on those surveys. Pay attention to that. There's nothing wrong, I think, if you believe in quality. Because I thought the other part that was interesting with Dr. Stanley is he showed how these shoes would be worn for years. So since it was something that was used a lot, but only purchased in a very scarce or so often period, it made sense to focus on the quality and do it right the first time. So you're not buying a bunch of cheap stuff that actually makes you uncomfortable, as well as if you add them all up because of the low quality, you actually spend more. This is a good way of thinking about this type of use resource.
It's really interesting, Brian, because you talk about one of the things that did not come into the equation was specifically the name brand or the popular brand. It was really more about quality and value. So it's okay to pay more if the increased price is justified by the value that you're receiving for it. If you're just buying expensive shoes for the sake of buying expensive shoes, that is a different thing. We're talking about shoes that actually have some staying power, whether they have medical benefits or just long-lasting tenure. It probably makes sense to do that. Now, this other one, Brian, is another one that you kind of told me about. I think you said this one day, you're like, Bo, you realize when you get married, you and your wife are going to have to make all these decisions. One of the things you have to do is you have to buy a mattress.
Yeah.
Don't skimp. Because you sleep on a mat, like if you sleep the average 8 hours a night, right? You're spending a lot of time on this thing. Make sure you buy something of quality that is really, really good instead of just buying the cheapest one that you can buy.
Well, I think it's also interesting. The first 8 years of my marriage, because I was completely a tightwad, I bought a queen mattress instead of a king mattress. And I wish somebody had said, hey, Brian, with two people on this bed, for just an incremental more money spent, you could get so much more room and comfort. So it's not always just the brand name. It's also thinking about the sizing of that mattress decision. Now, I will tell you there's some disruptions on this front.
Absolutely.
And the fact there were only a few quality players that were creating the mattresses, now there's all kind of, they've got this new technology where they can roll up these mattresses into boxes. They literally can mail you. There's all kind of disruptions in this. So maybe you don't have to spend a fortune on the right mattress, but I would tell you, go out there and do the research because you will be spending a lot of hours, literally years of your life on this. So it's a decision you need to do well.
All right, Brian, so we talked about houses, we talked about cars, and then I said this statement, you want to think about spending money on the things that you are on. And we were talking about physically on, like shoes and like mattresses. But we also think, and perhaps this is a hot take, you want to spend money on things that you are on, like your cell phone. And I think most of us in this day and age where we live, a lot of us are on our phones all the time. So perhaps if we're using them in that way, it makes sense to make a quote unquote investment in the type of technology that we're using.
This one is, because I think if you talk to my oldest daughter, she would say, where a place that young people flex is in the how nice their cell phones are.
Okay.
And I don't want you going out there and getting yourself in a bunch of debt, because maybe there's usually ways to trim the cost down, whether the size of the storage or other things. But you can end up with good quality phones for reasonable prices. And the reason I do like getting nicer phones is because they do everything now. I mean, if you think about it, it's not like a phone is just to connect you on phone calls anymore. It's also your camera. It's your video camera for making memories. So the quality of the cameras now on the new modern phones is pretty incredible. So it makes sense to take advantage of some of those latest tools and other things that come with these things, because that is going to be part of the memory making process. And I'm always going to give you a little more grace if it's something that helps you build those blossoming memories.
I think it's really interesting, Brian. My wife operates a small business, and she has done this for the past couple of years, and she's been able to do it almost exclusively from her phone. So for us, it's very easy for us to justify that we don't get the latest and greatest, newest model every year. But when we start noticing things like maybe the updates are not as frequent, or maybe the technology has advanced where it can do something different than it did previously, we kind of tend to think, okay, well, we're using this so much, it's such an impactful part of our social life, but also our financial life. Perhaps it does make sense for this to be something that we spend money on.
Now, kind of close out this point, I thought it was interesting. This was put together by the content team. Little did they know that every one of the phones on this historical display of mobile phones through history, I owned every one of these except for the 1992 one. I mean, literally, and I thought it was interesting, like on that 2000 phone, I had a Nokia with a cool skin. I didn't even know about this game called Snake.
It blows my mind, because I actually also owned I know we look a lot alike. I'm significantly younger than Brian is, and yet I also had all of these phones except for the 1992. And I said, oh, Brian, yeah, you remember the Nokia? Remember we used to play Snake? And he was like, Snake, what's that? And it blew my mind. And I think about now the video games that I see people playing. We had an intern, this summer playing these like live action walking around video games. The phone technology has changed over the years. And this was a really interesting nugget. I think it was Daniel that told us this. Both the 2000 phone and the 2021 phone both cost $1,000.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing. And I wish, if I had to do it all over again, I would have shown, because we've used it on other shows, that Radio Shack advertisement that had the phones, it had your computer, it had these fax machine, it had all these different things on one page. Everything that was for sale on this Radio Shack advertisement was now packaged in the phones that sit in our pockets. It's kind of incredible. So since it is such a powerful tool and resource for you, there's nothing wrong with just making sure you get the quality that lets you maximize your life.